Good evening and welcome to special council meeting. The first order of business is a public hearing, and we've received an application to enter into a development agreement with the property owner of 111 Head of Roberts Island Road to permit an oyster grading facility and general storage facility on this property. So with that, we'll open up the hearing, and we have Jess Harper from WPC. WPC? Yes? WSP. I knew I had the right letters. I just didn't know where to put them. I do that with my name sometimes. Okay, if you're ready to go, you're on.
I'm going to share my screen. Let me know if everyone can we see this and hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I'm going to give a brief overview here for the public hearing, which, as just mentioned, is for an application for a development agreement to permit an oyster grading facility and general storage facility at 111 Head of Roberts Island Road. So just a brief overview here of the site context. So as mentioned, it's located at 111 Head of Roberts Island Road, which you can see in the image here is the site outlined in yellow. The site is designated coastal community. It's also zoned coastal community. The property is just shy of about 33 acres in size, with approximately 48 meters of road frontage there on the street. And the previous use here of the site was a mink farm. You can see within the highlighted yellow property boundary the buildings that were previously used. So the proposal for this development agreement application is to repurpose the existing 9 buildings that are there on the site that's shown there in the upper photo. One building will be used for the oyster grading and storage, as pointed out, with the remainder of the buildings located on the site used for warehousing and private storage. The site contains private driveways, some informal parking, as well as on-site septic and well, which will continue to be used for this use. Nothing is proposed to change on the site. So as far as the development agreement goes, the development agreement outlines what the use of the property allows, which is the grading and storage of oysters. It allows general storage warehouse facilities, as well as it permits accessory structures and parking areas. So in addition to those uses which have been requested by the applicant, the development agreement also permits all the underlying uses that are currently permitted in the coastal community zone. As part of the development agreement, there are provisions in place and controls as far as lighting, operation, and maintenance of the property. There's also a section there that has to deal with amendments and which ones would be considered non-substantive, and anything not listed as a non-substantive amendment would be considered substantive, which would be required to come back to council through the public process and public hearing for council's approval. And anything that would be considered substantive would be any significant alteration, such as an expansion or new buildings that would be placed onto the site. Some of the non-substantive ones would be the timing, accessory structures, parking, signage. So in conclusion, I might have missed it. In conclusion, so the application is for the conversion from a mink farm to a less intensive use here, which is the grading and storage for oysters and general storage in general on the site. The proposed development is consistent with the intent of the municipal planning strategy, and it complies with the land use bylaw requirements, which includes minimum lot size, minimum frontage, and building setbacks for this use. The recommendation that is before council here tonight is to approve entering into a development agreement to allow the existing buildings to be used for an oyster grading operation storage facility at 111 Head of Roberts Island Road, as set out in attachment A of the staff report. Require that the agreement be signed by the property owner within 3 months or any extension thereof granted by council on request of the property owner from the date of the approval. And so this is just a brief overview kind of where we are in the process. So tonight we're here at the public hearing for approval or refusal from council. An ad did go in the newspaper to notify property owners. Following tonight, if approval is granted, there'll be a notice of approval in the local paper. There will be a 14-day appeal period prior to the DA being signed and registered. And then I am here for any questions.
Anybody have any questions? Do we have questions from the people, from the public? No questions there, no question. You have a question? No, I'm good. Okay. Anybody at all? Well, yeah.
Just at our last PAC meeting, one of the questions that was brought up, and I don't think we could actually answer, and we're hoping that Raymond would be here and could maybe answer, was around the smell, I believe, of the oysters. Would there be a smell? And no, nobody really from our group could answer that question. So I'm just gonna put it back to maybe to Raymond if you can answer that question.
Could you come to the mic so that she can hear you as well? Wait till they turn it on here. It didn't come on. No, it's not on. There you go.
Yeah, okay, good. As far as the smell is, I can't see it as much different than being at the shore. So as far as all the oysters would come on land, but then whatever gets graded, the empty shells and stuff, that all goes back to the ocean, and the other oysters go back to the ocean, right? So there's no real stuff just kicking around to make smell.
Thank you.
Councilor Dochemont.
So it's storage or for the oysters, are you guys going to be pumping water in there, or is it just cold storage, or how's that all work?
Cold storage in the future, but most of this is actually going to be used for storage of people's boats, RVs, that kind of stuff, right? And then a cold storage in the future once I decide that it's time to sell oysters, right?
So, but where you're holding the oysters, will there be water going in there? Is it like a pipeline or just?
Not right now.
Oh, okay.
No.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Councilor Saunier.
Thank you. I guess his question spawned this one. So you're looking to expand? Are you going to get bigger in the future if you can?
As far as looking to get bigger is
Turned off. There we go.
I'm going to be growing more oysters. Right now, the oyster farm isn't actually that big as far as the amount of oysters I can put on these leases. But then this opportunity came up, so I figured I'd pick up the property because I was looking to build something on my other piece of property that's right alongside of this one. So I will be looking to grow more oysters and to get bigger with that. But because this property came for sale, I figured storage, other people's storage, was probably an opportunity now, right?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Seeing no one else? No? Okay. I didn't see your light. Were you on? No? Okay. So if nobody else, I guess that's all. And we just need a motion from council to accept or whatever. So that'll be done once we start the meeting itself. So thank you very much, Jess.
No problem.
So we'll call the meeting to order. We've had two regrets, Councillor Surratt and Councillor Donaldson. And I think it's only fitting we've had a former warden who passed away, who was buried yesterday, and I think it's only fitting to have a moment of silence for the passing of former warden Edward LeBlanc. Thank you very much. And as always, there's an invitation to stand and move. If anybody wants to get up, just to move around, just feel free to do so. We have an agenda. Anybody have any additions? Your light is, oh, wait a minute, I gotta refresh. There we go. Go ahead, Councillor Digdon.
Thank you. Just, there's some problems going on down home with the Abbott's Harbor Wharf, and just looking for a letter of support for the fishers, and possibly one to go to our MP's office.
Okay, so we'll put that under 7C,
Thank you.
and we can discuss it at that time. Thank you for coming. Okay. If there's no other additions, the agenda stands as with the addition with the addition that we just discussed. Any conflict of interest? Anybody who has conflict of interest, you can always bring it up if there is one when the item that you have a conflict with comes up. The adoption of minutes of June 29, 2023, Executive Council meeting minutes. Any errors or omissions? Seeing no one speaking up, the minutes will stand approved as presented. We have a couple of items for decision. Now, one question I have about the one that we just had the hearing, is that the second reading still? It's still the second reading, but we have to approve what the recommendation to accept before we do the second reading. Is that a different motion? Say we could accept or reject, but so when we do the second reading, that accepts what we just went through then. Okay. So the first one, the second reading, development agreement, 345 Gray Road, East Kemp. There's an attachment. I think we've all heard the application. We've all gone through this. So are there any questions or comments about that application? And I have Councillor Docherman.
Do we get any feedback or anything else after we had it on, I don't know when it was, I guess June 23rd?
No, we did not. We didn't
Right.
get any concerns.
Okay, thank you.
So what we would need is a motion.
So, second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. It was moved by Deputy Warden. I heard 2 seconds. Okay. Councillor Docherman. There's no further discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary minded. Carried. Second reading of Development Agreement 111, head of Roberts Island Road, and that's the public hearing that we just had.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, it's moved. Can we have a seconder so we can discuss it after the second? So it's moved by Councillor Bork and seconded by Councillor Boudreau. Discussion, Councillor Saulnier.
The only question I have was similar to Kelvin's question. The last time, it's in Donaldson's district. The last time we talked about this, the first reading, he mentioned there was no one in his district that contacted him for or against it. Does that still stand?
I can't speak for Councillor Donaldson, but I can speak for the municipality. We have not received any concerns or complaints around this. We've put it on social media. We posted it in the Vanguard. We've done what we were supposed to do, and I've heard nothing from the public.
And they would have had an opportunity to speak
And
here
they-
tonight as
tonight,
well.
correct.
Anybody who had opposition to this had the opportunity tonight to do that, because we are online.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Digdon.
Thank you. The only thing I was going to say as well, although we may be approving this development agreement, like we do a lot of development agreements, it doesn't mean for the people that's receiving these development agreement that it's just carte blanche and they can do what they want. Like we as a municipality have bylaws in place that if there is noise, if there is smell, if there is whatever, that we have bylaws in place and policies that we can actually go in and say, you know, listen, this is not fitting
Yeah.
where it should, and this is, you're not living up to the agreement of our bylaws. So,
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
so-
They're signing an agreement, and they have to abide by that agreement. If they
Exactly.
don't, then we have the opportunity and the power to get them to rectify whatever is not, it's not following the agreement. Or
Exactly.
if they don't,
Yeah.
they can be shut down.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
So just, yeah.
So we have a motion on the floor. There's no more discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary minded? Carried. The next one is item 7C, and I'm going to pass that on to Councillor Digdon, and it's for letter of support for the Abbots Harbour Wharf.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for letting me add that on the agenda here this evening. Just going to give a little background, I guess, to what's going on down at the Abbots Harbour Wharf, if I may. 2 weeks ago at this time, the Abbots Harbour Wharf had trucks on it in excess of 25,000 kilograms. And as of the 28th of July, 2023, it was blocked off the vehicle traffic altogether. Now, there's 16 boats that fish out of that wharf with 3 to 4 people to a boat. There's no room in the area, and when I say in the area, I've been talking with people from Argyle around the East Pubnico. There's no room for these boats to go if they cannot use that wharf. So the Abbots Harbour Wharf is under Small Crafts and Harbors Program, DFO, and is classified as a core fishing harbor. This means that it is deemed as a critical to the commercial fishing industry and has been intensively used since at least 1884, when the first lighthouse was built on Abbots Harbour Island. Used by commercial fisheries, seaweed harvesters, fish farm workers, sport fishers, pleasure boaters, and many more. The Small Craft Harbor website states the program primary responsibility is to ensure core fishing harbors are kept open and in good shape. So this by far is not staying up to what their mandate is. So all I'm looking for here this evening is a letter of support from the municipality district of Argyle to go to the Abbots Harbour Wharf Authority and also to our MP and see if we can't come up with a solution that would work for everyone. Right now, at this point in time, it may be a temporary solution, maybe reduced weight restriction on the wharf or whatever the case may be, but at least get them through this season and hopefully do more work on it next year to bring it back up to where it should be.
And the letter of support would go to the Harbour Authority and to MP.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I have a motion made up stating that.
Okay. Well, you can read the motion, make the motion.
Thank you.
And then we can discuss it.
I would like to move that the municipality district of Argyle send a letter of support to the Abbots Harbour Wharf Authority and to our MP, Chris D'Entremont, to see if this problem can be resolved satisfactory for all parties involved using the Abbots Harbour Wharf.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Any comments? Councillor Bork.
Yes, I'm in support of this letter. I think it's time that our federal government wakes up. And we're probably gonna, in the future, we're gonna need all our wharves that we have because the boats are bigger and we need more room. And if this wharf, they're not able to tie there, there's nowhere, like Glenn said, to go. And there's other wharfs that probably need work and need, just lower East Pumlico, we have a part that the wharf is not, it's not fit to go on. They've blocked that one off, so that's less place for people to park. So thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.
Councillor Saulnier.
Thank you. I'm just going to add to what Councillor Bork just said. To further the argument or help you along, I'm curious as to why this wharf was let go the way it was, and why there isn't someone actively making sure that these wharfs don't fall in disrepair, because it's crucial to our industry. And if you can't use the wharf and there's no place for the bus, you got a problem. And I think it should be, we should make sure that any wharf in our municipality is inspected before it breaks, so to speak. Thank you.
Councillor D'Entremont.
I guess being a lobster fisherman, a commercial fisherman coming from West Pumlico, but I've traveled quite a bit in the Atlantic provinces, in Newfoundland, in PEI, New Brunswick, and other parts of Nova Scotia. I've seen many, and for me, an attraction is a fishing wharf. So I've been to many, and I've looked at the infrastructure. And some of these fishing wharfs in other communities have just a few boats, and have what I would say a stellar or beautiful, infrastructure with slipways and lifts and all kinds of stuff. While Abbott's Harbor has 15, 16, 17 boats, very active during the lobster season. And to see that in disrepair like this is, as far as I'm concerned, is a crime, So anyway, I'm of course in full support of this motion. So, thank you.
Okay. Deputy Warden.
Thank you. I kind of had a question, and it kind of goes off what both of you were saying. So when you said, Councillor Digdon, that there was a sign that was put up that there was no more, who like, where did that come from? Where did the sign come from? And I'm asking because I'm not in the fishing industry, so.
By all means.
Yeah.
I don't know if I said a sign. I said it was blocked off, I
Okay.
believe, or I was hoping that's what I said.
Okay.
Anyway, it was a truck came down there with 4 blocks weighing approximately 2,000 pounds per block, and it was put at the head of the wharf. So there's no traffic now beyond that at the head of the wharf. And I believe that would have came from DFO.
Okay.
I can only.
So is there, I guess my second part to my question is, and maybe you guys know, like, is there a plan in place for that? Like, that's what I'm wondering. If it's come to this, is there a plan in place for repairs?
Well,
because we can't not have that wharf.
And I'm glad you're asking that question, and I wish I could answer you. I may know more next week don't know if it'll be at this time or a little later, I guess, or in 2 weeks' time, because I plan on attending a meeting with some of the people from DFO. And what Councillor Ms. Saulnier said is, how does it get to this point? I honestly don't know. I don't believe when you live in an area where the survival of a lot of your communities revolves around the fishery, that these wharfs should ever be getting like this. And going back to what Councillor Bork said earlier, and that the wharf in East Pumlico has been condemned for years. They just blocked it off, and they just block them off, and with no signs of wanting to work on them or wanting to bring them back up to where they were. So each time this happens, you're losing. The community is losing. The fishers are losing. So like I say, I can't say what they have in store for us until we meet with them and go from there. But it's definitely something, what Councillor Sonia said, this is something that I feel as though should be looked at on this end of the province all the way around at your wharfs, and have like a 5-year plan on them okay, this one's good for 3 years, but in 3 years' time, we're gonna put some money into that wharf and that, but I don't think that is happening. It doesn't seem to be happening. And I'm not pointing no fingers. It's,
No,
we all have to work together on this, but, you know, come on, folks, we have to work together. You know, thank you.
And I have Councillor Sonia.
Thank you. I guess I've been part of the fishing community for 45 years. I'm now retired, but I know quite well about the wharfs. And it seems to add to your question, Councillor Albright, is every time wharfs need repair, there seems to have to be some lobbying by the fishermen. I don't know. I can't say there is or isn't. I don't know if there's actively anybody in the fishing or in the government side of it that looks at wharfs the way Department of Highways looks at roads, for instance. And if there isn't, there should be. And if there is, I just not aware of it. But it always seems the onus falls on the wharf committee and the local fishermen to lobby. And of course, it's all money. And you know, the greasy wheel gets, or the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I think it should change, especially with Glenn's comments here. I don't know what can be done, but it's always been hard to get the wharfs up to par. I've never seen one close up like this, though. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no more questions, we have a motion on the floor. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded, carried. The next item is correspondence and for information, and the item is on the Mariner Center expansion update. Who's going to take that? And while you're doing that, I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to go empty some water.
Okay. Well, thank you for being very specific about that. So I was hoping, I was thinking maybe this would be the meeting that I would go through the whole thing without saying a word, but there you go. It's over. It's not going to happen. So I can't say too much about the Mariner Center right now, and I know that Nicole is aware of all of this because of her involvement with the MCEB. So last week, the MCEB received a rather in-depth presentation from multiple people about 6 options that were on the table. Just historically, we had 2 options and selected one. And then we said, okay, Venton, go price this. And we were not happy with that result. So we had to expand our horizons a little bit. And we did, you know, some helpful people around the EPC table and beyond suggested that, you know, that option may or may not be attached to the original building, because what we saw was when you attach it, there's a lot of costs associated with doing so, because you're forced to do things that aren't in the order of the scope ladder of the project. So it forces you to do things that might be down on the ladder of priority, and then you run out of money, and then maybe you don't get to do the things that you said you wanted to do. So long story short, a selection was presented. There was one clear suggestion from the EPC, which was brought to the electeds, which was the MCEB. They agreed that that was the one option. It was very centered on cost. It was of all the 6 options, it was the least expensive. We're still ironing out certain things, so we're not talking about budget right now because it's too early. We don't know. There's far too many unknowns before we get there. So we recommended that this selection was the choice of the MCEB and not of individual councils. And I'm here to tell you why. Because the design is within the scope that you agreed on. So it's not bigger. It's not doing something you didn't want something to happen. It's not doing that. And we're not asking you for more funding. Because if we needed more funding, it would come to the individual councils. So at this point, we're very pleased with where we are. so next week we'll have a meeting with the joint councils. It's an information meeting, and we'll go through the same kind of decision that we went through with the MCEB. But and you're aware, we have distributed at least the recommendation that was made. You'll have a full report at that point, and fundraising committee and other committees will be invited to see this as well. We're trying to be careful to do things right. We want for the owners to see things first. So there's a lot of like, okay, well, who should see this, and make sure that person sees it and not somebody else. And so we don't want to trip over ourselves, because we're trying to manage relationships as well. We have 23 councillors, each of which are looking in on this project. So I'd say next Wednesday is a very big day, probably an hour and a half to 2 hours meeting, depending on the amount of questions. Joint, because we want to see everybody together again. If that's a positive meeting, we'll push more public information out, and sooner rather than later, we'll see what we call a 33% detailed design. So you pick a schematic, which is basically blocks, right? And then they go in and make the blocks real. So, you'll know where the toilets are. You'll know where all those things are at 33%. We are going to be asking community groups to engage as well, maybe as a focus group. So we want their input on the design. We don't want them to say, you like this design or you dislike it. That decision's been made. It's what part of the design do you need to input in to maximize that information. So that's the brief update for you. And if there are any questions that I can answer, I'm here to answer them.
Anybody have any questions? I see no questions. So thank you for that.
Not a problem.
Financial requests, district community grant request from Morris Island Betterment Society, $500 from District 4.
I'd like to make a motion that we, Municipality of Argyle, give $500 to the Morris Island Betterment Committee.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary-minded, carried. Agenda topics for next meeting or notice of motion by councillors. Seeing none. Any questions in question period? No questions. So we have an in-camera session, and I guess a motion to go in camera.
Move to go in camera.